Good evening to everyone present here. As Prisha just introduced, I'm a member of the Science and Mathematics faculty in Calcutta International School. First, I would like to begin by thanking all the organizers, students and teachers alike for making this event such a huge success. And I'm humbled to be able to share this stage with such an eminent panel of speakers. As the first humans walked the face of this earth, they didn't worry about promotions or Instagram likes or even TEDx speeches for that matter. They worried about three things: hunger, weather, and not getting eaten by wild animals. These primitive stimuli sparked the first set of innovations in mankind. To survive, humans became hunter-gatherers. They started forming small communities and they began to trade for basic necessities. These were the first roots in the human brain. Gradually, as they began to evolve in their lives, they realized that so long trying to fight all the adverse circumstances, their brains were only accessing the limbic system, which is the emotional and survival center of the brain. But as society progressed, as the world around humans evolved, so did their brains. With the stimuli getting more and more sophisticated, the frontal lobe of the brain began to take center stage. Humans didn't just react to threat or danger. They were now beginning to design, they were beginning to create, reflect. Higher order thinking still started to take the center stage. The limbic system, for some of us who don't know, like me, maybe 2 days back, this is the center of the brain that is responsible for the anxiety and the panic that kicks in when you get a message that say, hey, we got to talk. But as society began evolving, human beings started gradually moving from this region of the brain into the frontal lobe. Modern studies in neuroplasticity show how meaningful experiences actually leave behind a physical trace in the brain. A challenge, meeting a new person, a story, or even a kind word for that matter, shapes new neural pathways in our brain to help us evolve into the people we become. Our brains are not fixed. They are constantly rewiring themselves as a response to the life we live. But if you think of me, standing here as an educator today, my rewiring of the brain didn't look scientific at all. I'll tell you how it started. It started as humid Kolkata evenings where I was tucked away, nestled against the warm skin of my grandmother, laying in bed and listening to the enchanting stories of Thakumar Jhuli. Thakumar Jhuli is a collection of Bengali folk tales. These are a collection of stories filled with princes and princesses and demons, mystical beings. And little did I know that neuroplasticity had already kicked in. But for this little girl nestled away in her grandmom's arms, it was just magic. Even today, I see myself gravitating towards fantasy fiction, fairy tales, tales of transformation. And as I stand here today, I honor all the grandmothers, the educators, and the quiet storytellers, and bring to you a short fairy tale of my own. Once upon a time, there was this little girl who was painfully self-conscious about her looks, the color of her skin, and the preconceived notions that society said for what was appropriate and what was not. She didn't know it back then, but her Cinderella story had already begun. It didn't begin with a ball or a prince or a pumpkin carriage. It began in a school corridor during a washroom break. So in one such carefree afternoon when she had slipped away from the classroom, sort of negotiating a few stolen minutes of freedom, she skipped her way along the corridor and absent-mindedly humming the then famous number "My Heart Will Go On" by Celine Dion. Little did she know that in the shadows lurked an ardent listener. Suddenly, a tall and lanky woman stopped her mid-stride. She said, with a stern expression on her face, "Sing the song again." That girl was scared. She was convinced that she had committed some unspeakable crime, and word would go home, and she would face detention and all of the likes. Nonetheless, with her voice trembling, she sang that chorus the best she could. Miss Day's face softened. She smiled, almost as if she had found a hidden gem. She said, "Let nothing silence your voice, Suvasree." And that was the first root that struck in my brain that has anchored me to music till this day. And it has given me the courage to stand on a stage. Thus was my milestone in the journey from roots to wings. We all know the quintessential Cinderella story, right? There is the ballroom, the glass slipper, the fairy godmother who appears out of nowhere in a burst of fairy dust. But what if fairy godmothers are not mystical beings at all? What if they are simple, ordinary people living next door? Another such fairy godmother stepped into my life when I was in grade 4 and the substitution lesson was on, and we all know how that goes like. She stepped into the room with a list of names in her hands and she said, "I would like to take these girls out," and my name happened to be one of them. So we stepped out of the classroom, we queued up, and she led us down the corridor to the next available venue without an iota of context. So later, much later, when I was reading Harry Potter and Professor McGonagall was escorting Harry to meet Oliver Wood, I realized then why it hit so close home. When we were taken to the room, we were handed out a sheet of paper and we were said that we were going to be auditioned for an elocution competition. We were going to be checked for enunciation, confidence, and presentation. For a grade 4 girl who was struggling to breathe, just about trying not to faint, those were very big words. Nonetheless, when my chance came, I took that sheet of paper, I read the extract out loud, and lo and behold, the next day, I got to know that I was selected to represent my house in an inter-house elocution competition. Trust me, back then as a grade 4 student with not as much access to internet as we have today, I didn't know what elocution meant back then. I researched a little and I picked up William Wordsworth's Daffodils. I whispered to myself, "You've got this," and I gave it the best shot. Somehow that day I walked away with the 3rd prize. But the story doesn't end here. This competition paved the path towards me being selected as a as the male lead to be cast in our school's production of Hansel and Gretel. Another root struck deep into the soil. The love for stage performance and the realization that I can hold an audience's attention. Gradually, small roots began to take form. Gradually, I began to grow my own set of wings, and the shackles of self-doubt began to give way. Another such mentor I had in my life was my awe-inspiring physics and mathematics teacher, Mrs. Gopa Chatterjee. She could gaze into a student's soul, and how. And this year, some of my cheeky students gave me a Teacher's Day award that said, Ms. Banerjee can gaze into students' eyes. So now you know where I get it. I learned from the best. Once it so happened that she was my class teacher. And I had committed a very gross mistake, something I'm not proud of. And in an intervention, I had her sitting across from me, the dragon lady. And I was scared. I didn't know how to react, what she would say. I was embarrassed for having let her down. But to my amazement, she didn't say anything. I saw that dragon lady gradually transform into a fairy godmother. And she said, Suvasree, I believe that you have already reflected that you are a better person than you were that instance. A load lifted off my chest. Another root struck deep into my being, into who I am today. In quintessential Cinderella stories, the messy parts are usually left out. You always have bare chapped feet cut to glass slippers. You have pumpkins that transform magically into pumpkin coaches. But roots to wings, the journey from roots to wings is hardly ever a linear one. Up next, I had in my life Professor Madhav Bandyopadhyay. He was my maternal uncle. He was a professor of physics. And in any family gatherings, like Chiro was talking about, always Mesho and I, we were tucked away in some corner having our usual banter that had got nothing to do with the celebrations that were going around. People usually assumed that we were discussing some very complicated physics principles, we were debating something, discussing some equation, but he usually taught me more about life than lenses and levers. Now when I look back, the image of him that I have in my brain, him sitting in his chair, a cup of tea next to him, that was more often cold than hot. He had his students sitting around him who doted on him. And he exuded this calmness, the calmness that could only come out of this deep reservoir of knowledge and practicality. And the kind of lessons he taught me in my life have struck such deep roots in me that even today I implement them and I try to navigate my life based on his reassuring words. Everything will work out eventually. We usually wait for miracles to come into our lives with fireworks and trumpets. But what if the true miracle is just a shift in our perspective? What if fairy godparents were not magical beings at all? If we shift our perspectives slightly, we will be able to see that these glass slippers, the pumpkin carriage, fairy godmothers, and their magic tricks that happened in a swish and a flick of their wand, they're strewn across all our daily lives. We have to understand that if we look beyond what is visible to us directly, we will be able to form these dense, intricate neural networks in our minds that can actually help us form mighty, strong wings to eventually take aspirational flights. Now, as I stand here as an educator, I was also in the crossroads when I was choosing my career. When it struck me that becoming an educator gave me this vantage point to somehow amplify this magic. Every little concept that I delivered in class, every aha moment that struck in the heads of my students would eventually be stepping stones in their journey from roots to wings. Now, as I stand here, I ask you all to look around yourselves. Who are your fairy godmothers? Which fleeting, ordinary moment is handing you your glass slipper? You know what is best about real life, even better than fairy tales? That if we can take these roots and sort of nurture them into intricate neural networks that help us shape into who we are, we will soon realize that there is no final stroke of midnight. We will keep moving slowly from one miracle to another. So today, when we step out from here, let us embrace these small, fleeting miracles in our lives to gradually go on to become the next door Cinderella. Thank you.